I froze at the top of the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The sounds coming from our bedroom were unmistakable, a woman's giggle followed by my husband Ted's low chuckle. My hands trembled as I gripped the banister, willing myself to move. "Oh, Ted," a breathy voice cooed. "You're so bad." I felt bile rise in my throat. This couldn't be happening, not in our home, not in our bed. With shaky steps, I approached the partially open door. I should have turned and run, pretended I'd never heard a thing. But my body moved of its own accord, pushing the door wide. The sight before me knocked the wind from my lungs. Ted, my husband of 15 years, tangled in our sheets with a woman I recognized as Lisa from his office. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "Natalie," Ted scrambled to cover himself, nearly tumbling off the bed. I can explain." I stood frozen, unable to form words as Lisa gathered her clothes, face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, ducking past me and fleeing down the stairs. The slam of the front door jolted me back to reality. I turned to Ted, who was hastily pulling on his pants. "Explain?" I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Explain how you could do this to me? To our family?" Ted ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Natalie, please, it's not what you think." "Not what I think." My voice rose, anger finally breaking through the shock. "I just caught you in bed with another woman, in our home." "Keep your voice down," Ted hissed. "The boys might hear." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, now you're worried about the boys? Where was that concern when you were screwing your coworker?" Ted's face hardened. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of obsessing over the kids all the time, this wouldn't have happened." His words hit me like a slap. "Are you seriously blaming me for your affair?" "It's not an affair," Ted insisted. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing." "Don't lie to me," I spat. "I've seen the way you look at her at company parties. How long has this been going on?" Ted's silence was all the answer I needed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs no longer able to support me. "I gave up everything for you," I whispered. "My career, my independence, and this is how you repay me?" "Natalie, please." Ted knelt before me, reaching for my hands. I jerked away from his touch. "We can work through this, for the boys' sake." The mention of our children snapped something inside me. I stood abruptly, nearly knocking Ted over. "Don't you dare use our sons as an excuse," I snarled. "You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed." I stormed out of the room, Ted's pleas falling on deaf ears. In a daze, I found myself in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as sobs racked my body. The sound of small feet on the stairs made me hastily wipe my eyes. 10-year-old Jake appeared in the doorway, his younger brother Ethan close behind. "Mom?" Jake's brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay? We heard yelling." I forced a smile, my heart breaking at the worry in his eyes. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Mommy and Daddy just had a little disagreement." Jake didn't look convinced, but nodded slowly. "Okay, can we have some ice cream?" "Sure," I said, grateful for the distraction. As I scooped Rocky Road into bowls, my mind raced. What was I going to do? How could I face Ted after this? And most importantly, how would I protect my boys from the fallout of their father's betrayal? One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I stared at the framed photo on my nightstand, a reminder of happier times. Ted and I on our wedding day, faces beaming with hope and love. How quickly things had changed. The bedroom door creaked open, and Ted's reflection appeared in the mirror. "Natalie, we need to talk," I turned, steeling myself. "About what? How you destroyed our marriage." Ted sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Remember how good we used to be together?" His words transported me back to our early days. I'd been a rising star at my marketing firm, burning the midnight oil to climb the corporate ladder. Then I met Ted. "You swept me off my feet," I said softly. "Made me believe in fairy tales." Ted's eyes lit up. "We can have that again. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, the spell broken. "No, Ted, you don't get it. This isn't just about the affair. It's about everything that led to it." "What do you mean?" "Remember when you convinced me to quit my job?" I asked, anger rising. "You promised to take care of me, said we'd be partners, but that's not what happened, is it?" Ted's face darkened. "I provide for this family. What more do you want?" "A husband who respects me," I shot back. "Who doesn't treat me like a glorified maid and nanny?" "That's not fair," Ted protested. I work hard to give you and the boys everything. Everything except your time and attention, I countered. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about bills or the kids' schedules? Ted fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. I gave up my career for you, I continued, years of resentment pouring out. And what did I get in return? A husband who's never home, who belittles my contributions, who seeks comfort in another woman's arms. I said I was sorry about Lisa, Ted mumbled. Sorry isn't enough, I exploded. Do you have any idea how it feels to discover your husband's betrayal in your own home? To realize that the life you've built is a lie? Ted's jaw clenched. You're not innocent in this, Natalie. You've been distant for years, always focused on the kids, never making time for us. His words hit like a punch to the gut. Are you seriously blaming me for your affair? I'm saying we're both responsible for the state of our marriage, Ted replied, his voice rising. But you're acting like I'm the only one at fault here. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize neglecting you justified sleeping with your coworker. That's not what I meant, and you know it, Ted growled. I'm trying to have an honest conversation here, but you're twisting everything I say. Honest? I scoffed. That's rich coming from you. How long would you have continued lying to me if I hadn't caught you? Ted's silence spoke volumes. That's what I thought, I said, turning away. I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight. Natalie, please, Ted pleaded. We can work through this, for the boys' sake, if nothing else. I whirled back to face him, fury blazing in my chest. Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. You should have thought about them before you invited that woman into our bed. Ted's face crumpled. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you, Natalie. I love our family. Please give me another chance. For a moment, I wavered. The pain in his eyes was genuine, and part of me longed to believe him. But then I remembered the sounds of his laughter with Lisa, the casual way he'd blamed me for his infidelity. I need time, I said finally. Time to think, to figure out what I want. Can you give me that? Ted nodded slowly. Whatever you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. As he left the room, I sank onto the bed, my mind reeling. Could we salvage our marriage? Did I even want to try? One thing was certain, I couldn't continue living in this limbo. Something had to change, and soon. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers in front of me. The weight of my decision pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. A week had passed since I'd caught Ted with Lisa, and the wound still felt raw. The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. Ted walked in, his eyes immediately landing on the papers. What's this? He asked, his voice tight. I took a deep breath. I think you know, Ted. I can't do this anymore. His face contorted with anger. You're seriously considering divorce? After everything we've been through? Everything we've been through? I echoed, incredulous. You mean your affair? Ted slammed his hand on the table, making me flinch. For God's sake, Natalie, I made a mistake. How many times do I have to apologize? It's not just about the affair, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. It's about years of neglect, of feeling like I don't matter. That's not fair, Ted growled. I've provided for this family, given you everything you could want. Except respect, I shot back, except partnership. Ted's eyes narrowed. Is that what this is about? You feeling unappreciated? Maybe if you'd put as much effort into our marriage as you did into being a martyr, we wouldn't be in this mess. His words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up, hands shaking. Get out. This is my house, Ted sneered. You don't get to tell me what to do. Your house? I laughed bitterly. The one I've kept running while you were off playing house with your mistress? Ted's face flushed with rage. He took a step toward me, and for a moment I was afraid he might strike me. Instead, he spun on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed into the chair, tears streaming down my face. How had we come to this? The man I'd loved, the father of my children, now a stranger filled with anger and resentment. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my sister, Leah. How are you holding up? Want to talk? Relief washed over me. I needed my big sister now more than ever. An hour later, I sat on Leah's couch, pouring out my heart. She listened patiently, her kind eyes filled with concern. Oh, Natalie, she sighed when I finished. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but honey, you need to stand up for yourself. Ted doesn't get to dictate your worth. I nodded, wiping away tears. I know, but it's hard. We've been together so long, and the boys. Leah took my hands in hers. Listen to me. You deserve happiness. You deserve respect, and your boys deserve to see their mother valued and strong. But what if I can't do it? I whispered. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Leah said firmly. You're one of the strongest women I know. You just need to remember that. As I drove home, Leah's words echoed in my mind. She was right. I'd let Ted chip away at my confidence for too long. It was time to reclaim my power. I walked into the house, steeling myself for another confrontation. But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Ted sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. You're right, I've been a terrible husband. I don't deserve you. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say we could work it out. But then I remembered Leah's words. You're right, I said quietly. You don't deserve me. Not anymore. Ted's face crumpled. Natalie, please, I'll do anything. Go to counseling, quit my job, whatever you want. I shook my head. It's too late, Ted. I've made my decision. As I turned to leave the room, Ted called out, desperation in his voice. What about the boys? Don't they deserve a chance at a whole family? I paused, my hand on the doorframe. They deserve parents who respect each other, who show them what real love looks like. I looked back at him, my voice steady. And that's what I intend to give them, with or without you. With those words, I walked away, leaving Ted and the remnants of our broken marriage behind. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. My future, on my own terms. I watched the boys' faces as we pulled up to Leah's house, our car packed with hastily thrown-together suitcases. Jake, at 10, wore a frown of confusion. 6-year-old Ethan's eyes were wide with excitement at the prospect of a vacation at Aunt Leah's. Mom, why isn't Dad coming? Jake asked as we unloaded the car. I swallowed hard. Dad needs to stay at our house for work, sweetie. We're going to have a little break here with Aunt Leah. Jake's frown deepened, but he didn't press further. I silently thanked God for small mercies. Leah enveloped us in a warm hug as we entered. Welcome, troops. I've got the guest rooms all set up for you. As the boys explored the house, Leah pulled me aside. How are you holding up? I felt my carefully constructed facade crumble. I don't know how I'm going to do this, Leah. I haven't worked in years. How am I supposed to support the boys on my own? Leah squeezed my hand. One step at a time, sis. Remember Dana from your old job? She called earlier asking about you. Said there might be some freelance work available if you're interested. Hope fluttered in my chest. Really? I haven't done marketing in so long. You're still sharp as a tack, Leah insisted. Give her a call. What have you got to lose? That night, after the boys were asleep, I dialed Dana's number with trembling fingers. Natalie? Dana's warm voice brought back memories of late nights brainstorming campaigns. I'm so glad you called. How are you? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I'm going through some changes. Leah mentioned you might have some work? Absolutely, Dana said. We've got a new client who needs a fresh perspective. It's remote work, perfect for juggling with family commitments. My heart raced. That sounds amazing, Dana, but it's been years since I've worked. I'm not sure I'm qualified anymore. Dana's laugh was reassuring. Natalie, you were one of the best in the business. That talent doesn't just disappear. Why don't you start with a small project and see how it goes? We chatted for an hour, discussing the project and catching up. By the time we hung up, I felt a glimmer of my old confidence returning. The next morning, I woke early to start work before the boys were up. As I logged into my laptop, a notification popped up, an email from Ted. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. I opened it. Natalie, I can't believe you just left like that. What about our family, our vows? You're abandoning your duties as a wife and mother. The boys need stability, not your selfish whims. Come home immediately, or there will be consequences. Ted, rage boiled in my veins. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he had the audacity to accuse me of abandonment? I was halfway through a scathing reply when Ethan's sleepy voice interrupted me. Mommy, can we have pancakes? I closed the laptop, pushing thoughts of Ted aside. Of course, sweetie. Let's wake up Jake and Aunt Leah and make it a pancake party. As we gathered in Leah's sunny kitchen, the boys giggling as they mixed batter and made a mess, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was what mattered, not Ted's accusations or my fears about the future. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. "Where are you? We need to talk. Now." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to lash out, to hurt him as he'd hurt me. But as I watched the boys playing in Leah's backyard, I knew I had to be the bigger person. I typed out a simple response. "We're safe. I'll have my lawyer contact you about arrangements for the boys." As I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. It wouldn't be easy, but with Leah's support and this new opportunity with Dana, I finally felt hope for the future. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a silent promise to myself and my sons. We would not just survive this, we would thrive. I was in the middle of a conference call with Dana and our new client when the doorbell rang. Leah answered it, and moments later I heard raised voices from the foyer. "Where is she?" Ted's angry voice carried through the house. My heart raced. I quickly muted my microphone and whispered to Dana, "Family emergency. I'll call you back." Stepping into the hallway, I saw Ted towering over Leah, his face red with anger. "Ted," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What are you doing here?" He whirled to face me. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here, Natalie? You can't just take the boys and disappear." "I told you we were safe," I replied, fighting to keep my voice calm. I needed time to think. Ted scoffed. "Think about what? How to destroy our family." Leah stepped between us. "I think you should leave, Ted. This isn't the time or place for this conversation." "Stay out of this, Leah," Ted snapped. "This is between me and my wife." "Don't talk to her like that," I said, anger rising in my chest. "Leah's been more supportive than you've been in years." Ted's eyes narrowed. "Oh, so that's what this is about? You feeling unsupported? I work my ass off to provide for this family, and this is the thanks I get." "Provide?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean control. You've spent years making me dependent on you, isolating me from my career, my friends." "I gave you everything," Ted shouted. "A beautiful home, vacations, the best schools for the boys. And you throw it all away for what? Some misguided notion of independence?" The boys appeared at the top of the stairs, wide-eyed and frightened. Seeing them, I made a decision. "Boys, go to your room," I said firmly. "Mom and Dad need to talk." Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to Ted. "This isn't working. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us. Ted's face paled. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I replied. "I've already spoken to a lawyer." "A lawyer?" Ted's voice rose again. "So you've been planning this all along? While I've been trying to save our marriage?" I shook my head. "Save our marriage? By blaming me for your affair? By trying to control my every move?" "I made a mistake with Lisa," Ted said, his tone softening. "But I love you, Natalie. We can work this out." For a moment, I wavered. Then I remembered the years of neglect, the constant belittling, the way he'd made me doubt myself. "No, Ted," I said quietly. "We can't. It's too late." Ted's face hardened. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I'll see you in court. Don't expect to take me for everything I'm worth." "This isn't about money," I replied. "It's about respect, something you clearly don't understand." As Ted stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah wrapped me in a hug. "I'm proud of you, sis," she whispered. Upstairs, I found the boys huddled together on Jake's bed. "Is Dad gone?" Ethan asked, his voice small. I sat down, pulling them both close. "Yes, sweetie, Dad's gone home." "Are we going back?" Jake asked. I took a deep breath. "No, honey, we're going to stay here with Aunt Leah for a while. Dad and we need some time apart." "Are you getting divorced?" Jake's eyes filled with tears. My heart broke, but I knew I had to be honest. "Yes, sweetheart, but I want you both to know that this doesn't change how much we love you. You're the most important things in our lives." As I held my boys, comforting them through their tears, I felt a surge of determination. I would build a new life for us, one filled with love, respect, and independence. It wouldn't be easy, but looking at Jake and Ethan, I knew it would be worth it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Ted. "This isn't over. I'll fight you every step of the way." I stared at the screen, a mix of fear and resolve washing over me. Then I typed out a response. "Bring it on. I'm done being your doormat." As I hit send, I knew there was no turning back. The battle for my freedom and my children's future had begun. 6 months had passed since I'd left Ted, and life had taken on a new rhythm. I'd thrown myself into work, quickly becoming one of Dana's most valuable freelancers. The boys were settling into their new school, making friends and slowly healing from the upheaval of our family. I was in the middle of a crucial client presentation when my phone buzzed insistently. Ignoring it, I focused on my pitch. As soon as I ended the call, I saw a flurry of missed calls and texts from Leah. "Natalie, call me ASAP. It's about Ted." My heart raced as I dialed her number. "Leah, what's wrong?" "Ted's here," she said, her voice tight. "He's demanding to see the boys, says he has court papers." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What? No, that's impossible. We have a custody agreement." "He's saying you violated it by moving without his consent. Natalie, he's threatening to take the boys." Panic clawed at my throat. "I'm on my way. Don't let him near them." I sped to Leah's house, my mind whirling. How could this be happening? We'd been so careful with the legal arrangements. As I pulled up, I saw Ted's car in the driveway. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation. The scene inside was chaos. Ted stood in the living room waving papers and shouting. Leah stood between him and the stairs, where I could hear the boys crying. "Ted, stop this!" I yelled, slamming the door behind me. "You're scaring the children." He whirled to face me, eyes blazing. "You've left me no choice, Natalie. You think you can just take my sons and cut me out of their lives?" "That's not what I'm doing," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We have an agreement. You see them every other weekend." "An agreement you broke when you moved them without my permission," Ted snarled. "I have rights, and I'm going to exercise them." I snatched the papers from his hand, scanning them quickly. My blood ran cold. He was right. There was a clause about relocating without mutual consent. "This is low, even for you," I hissed, "using the boys as pawns in your game." Ted's face softened slightly. "I don't want to do this, Natalie. Come home. We can work this out." For a moment, I wavered. The thought of losing my children was unbearable. But then I remembered why I'd left. The years of emotional abuse, the affair, the way he'd slowly chipped away at my self-worth. "No," I said firmly. "We're not coming back. This is our home now." Ted's expression hardened. "Fine, then I'll see you in court. I'll fight for full custody if I have to." As he stormed out, I collapsed onto the couch, my body shaking. Leah sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. "I can't lose them, Leah." "We'll figure it out," she said. "I'll call my lawyer friend. We'll fight this." I nodded, trying to believe her words. But doubt gnawed at me. How could I compete with Ted's resources? His connections? The sound of small feet on the stairs made me look up. Jake and Ethan stood there, tears streaking their faces. "Mom?" Jake's voice trembled. "Are we going to have to live with Dad?" I held out my arms, and they ran to me. Holding them close, I made a silent vow. I would not let Ted win. I would not let him destroy the new life we'd built. "No, sweetie," I said. My voice stronger than I felt. "We're staying right here. I promise." As I comforted my boys, my mind raced. I needed a plan. I needed to prove I could provide for them, that this new life was better for everyone. My phone buzzed, a text from Dana. "Client loved your pitch. They want to offer you a full-time position." I stared at the screen, a glimmer of hope piercing through the darkness. This could be it, the key to securing our future. Looking at my sons, then at Leah, I felt a surge of determination. Ted might have money and power, but I had love, resilience, and a newfound strength he couldn't begin to understand. The battle for my children's future had begun, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. 1 year after leaving Ted, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the timid housewife, replaced by a confident professional in a crisp blazer. I'd not only accepted Dana's full-time offer, but had quickly climbed the ranks to become a senior marketing executive. As I adjusted my necklace, a gift from Leah to celebrate my promotion, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. "Urgent news about Ted. Call ASAP." My stomach clenched. The custody battle had been brutal, with Ted using every dirty trick in the book. But we'd been holding our ground thanks to my new job and the stability we'd built. "What's happened?" I asked as soon as my lawyer picked up. "Ted's filed for emergency custody," she said, her voice grim. He's claiming you're an unfit mother due to your work schedule. The room spun. What? That's ridiculous. I've bent over backwards to balance work and the boys. I know, Natalie, but he's presenting a compelling case. We need to meet immediately to strategize. As I hung up, Leah appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. What's wrong? I filled her in, my voice shaking. How can he do this? After everything he's put us through? Leah's eyes flashed with anger. That bastard. He can't stand seeing you succeed without him. Just then, Jake and Ethan burst into the room, backpacks on and ready for school. Their smiles faded as they saw my face. Mom? Jake asked. Are you okay? I forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetie, just some work stress. As I hugged them goodbye, my heart ached. How could I tell them their father was trying to take them away? The day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time I got home, I was exhausted and terrified. Leah was waiting with a glass of wine and a sympathetic ear. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I confessed, tears streaming down my face. Maybe I should just give in, go back to Ted. Leah grabbed my shoulders. Don't you dare. You've come too far to give up now. Just then my phone rang. It was Dana. Natalie, I hate to do this, but we need you in New York next week for the Johnson pitch. It's make or break for the company. My heart sank. A week away from the boys, right when Ted was pushing for custody. But if I said no, I could lose the job that was keeping us afloat. I'll be there, I said, my voice hollow. As I hung up, Leah looked at me with concern. You can't go. Not now. I have to, I replied. If I lose this job, Ted wins. He'll prove I can't provide for the boys. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for work, Jake appeared in the kitchen, his young face serious. Mom, are you and Dad fighting again? I knelt down, meeting his eyes. Honey, your dad and we're having some disagreements about where you and Ethan should live. Jake's lip trembled. I don't want to live with Dad. I want to stay here with you and Aunt Leah. I pulled him close, fighting back tears. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that happens. I promise. As I watched Jake board the school bus, my resolve strengthened. I couldn't let Ted win. Not when the boys' happiness was at stake. That evening, as I packed for New York, my lawyer called again. Natalie, Ted's lawyer, reached out. They're proposing a settlement. My heart raced. What kind of settlement? Full custody to Ted with visitation rights for you. The room spun. No, absolutely not. Natalie, given your work commitments and the upcoming trip, it might be worth considering. No, I interrupted, my voice steel. I will not give up my children. Tell Ted and his lawyers we'll see them in court. As I hung up, I caught sight of myself in the mirror again. The woman staring back was fierce, determined, and ready for battle. Bring it on, Ted, I whispered. I'm not the woman you married anymore, and I'm sure as hell not going down without a fight. I stood outside the courtroom, my heart pounding. Today was the final custody hearing, the culmination of months of legal battles and emotional turmoil. As I smoothed my blazer, Leah squeezed my hand. You've got this, sis, she whispered. No matter what happens in there, you've already won by becoming the strong woman you are today. I nodded, drawing strength from her words. As we entered the courtroom, I caught sight of Ted. He looked haggard, his once crisp suit rumpled, and his eyes bloodshot. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, quickly replaced by steely resolve. The judge called the court to order, and Ted's lawyer began his final argument. He painted a picture of me as a career-obsessed mother who had abandoned her family. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream out in protest. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, meeting the judge's eyes. Your Honor, a year ago, I was a different woman. I had lost myself in a marriage that had become toxic and controlling. But leaving Ted wasn't about abandoning my family, it was about saving it. I gestured to the portfolio my lawyer had submitted. In the past year, I've built a successful career, providing stability and financial security for my children. But more importantly, I've shown them what it means to be strong, to stand up for yourself, and to create a loving home. As I spoke, I saw Ted's face crumple. For the first time, I realized he wasn't just angry, he was broken. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions about my work schedule and the boys' well-being. When she finally called a recess to consider her decision, I felt drained but hopeful. In the hallway, Ted approached me, his eyes red-rimmed. Natalie, can we talk? Leah started to intervene, but I held up a hand. It's okay, I've got this. Ted and I found a quiet corner. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you, hurting our family, until it was too late. I studied his face, seeing the man I'd once loved beneath the anger and bitterness. Ted, I'm sorry, too. Not for leaving, but for not being strong enough to stand up to you sooner. Maybe if I had, things would have been different. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I've lost everything, Natalie. The company's on the verge of bankruptcy. Lisa left months ago, but losing the boys, that's killing me. In that moment, I saw our entire history flash before my eyes. The good times and the bad, the love and the pain. And I made a decision. Ted, I don't want to take the boys away from you. They need their father. But they also need a healthy, stable environment. Can we find a way to co-parent that doesn't involve courts and lawyers? Hope flickered in his eyes. You'd be willing to try? I nodded. For the boys, and for us, not as a couple, but as parents who want the best for their children. When the judge called us back in, we approached her together. Our lawyers looked confused as we explained our desire to work out a co-parenting agreement outside of court. The judge smiled. I'm pleased to see you both putting your children's needs first. I'll grant a continuance to allow you to work out the details. But, she added, her gaze stern, if you can't come to an agreement, I will make a final ruling. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Leah was waiting, her face a mix of concern and curiosity. Are you sure about this? She asked as I explained what had happened. I nodded, watching Ted walk to his car. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. For all of us. That evening, as I tucked the boys into bed, Jake looked up at me with serious eyes. Mom, is Dad coming back? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. No, sweetie, Dad and I aren't getting back together. But we're going to work on being better parents to you and Ethan. You'll still see Dad regularly, and we'll all work on being a family, just in a different way. Jake nodded, seeming to understand. As I kissed him goodnight, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Later, standing on Leah's porch and looking up at the stars, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I'd lost a husband but found myself. I'd faced my greatest fears and come out stronger. And most importantly, I'd created a new kind of family, one built on love, respect, and resilience. As I breathed in the cool night air, I smiled. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the future, my future, our future. And it was bright with possibility.
I'm just going to use the restroom before we leave, I said, grabbing my purse with my phone and documents inside. I stepped off the train, feeling the cool air of the platform on my face. I stood there watching as the train doors closed, as the whistle blew, and as it slowly began to pull away from the station. My phone buzzed in my purse, snapping me out of my thoughts. Scott's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Nancy, where are you? Scott's panicked voice came through. We're not on the same path anymore, Scott, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm divorcing you. I hung up before he could respond. My hand shook as I opened my banking app and blocked Scott's access to our joint account. Barely a minute passed before my phone rang again. This time, it was Janet. I held the phone away from my ear as she shouted insults and threats, demanding that I pay for their trip and compensate them for emotional distress. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke calmly. Janet, I'm not afraid of your threat. If you post any slander, I won't hesitate to take legal action. I blocked her number, then Scott's, and finally Larry's, just to be sure. Taking a deep breath, I called a cab and went home. The weekend passed in a blur of emotions and practical tasks. I packed Scott's belongings, contacted a lawyer, and drafted the divorce papers. By Friday morning, I felt drained but determined. The sound of a key turning in the lock made me tense. Scott walked in looking disheveled and desperate. Nancy, please, he said, walking toward me with open arms. I stepped back, pointing to the suitcases by the door. Your things are packed. It's time for you to go. His expression twisted. You're not saying that. With a frantic tone, Scott declared, "I've learned my lesson." On the vacation, my mom and I got into a heated argument. I told them that I would no longer be paying for them. Even today, I'm not speaking with them. Please give me another opportunity. I gave him the divorce papers while shaking my head. Scott, it's too late. This has more to do with respect, trust, and the life I want to lead than it does with your parents. Our desires may differ, and that's acceptable. But I'm at my limit now. Scott nodded after a drawn-out silence, his shoulders lowering in surrender. With a gentle click, he closed the door behind him as he scooped up his luggage and left. The weeks that followed were difficult, but they were also liberating. Thanks to my meticulous documentation and Scott's acceptance of the circumstances, the divorce procedure was completed without incident. I lost myself in my profession, turning to writing and cooking for solace. After everything calmed down, I discovered that I was alone once more, but not in the way I had dreaded. I once again found delight in the small things, like experimenting with new dishes, relaxing on quiet evenings with a good book, and interacting with my followers without feeling obligated to meet anyone's expectations. I had a glass of wine on my balcony one evening and enjoyed the view of the city. I couldn't resist grinning. Although my life hadn't gone as I had hoped, perhaps it had worked out perfectly. Isabella was myself again, a culinary critic, a writer, and most of all, a woman in charge of her own life. "Are you ready to leave yet?" I said as I cast a quick glance around the almost empty room. A sigh came out of my friend. With a hint of relaxation in their voice, they said, "Just waiting on the movers." To be honest, I won't miss you around, and it was a bit much the way you changed the locks, as if I was going to try to break in. The question of why such drastic measures were required had always intrigued me, but it now seemed almost unimportant. Kevin was a reserved man who was constantly worried about what other people thought when we first met. He was the perfect example of a henpecked spouse after being married. I had moved into my new place for a week when Kevin seemed desperate. "It's me. Open up," he asked. I pretended not to see him, reacting to his fear with an act of deceit. "I'm Carol, a 34-year-old who works 4 days a week as a part-time employee. 3 years have passed since Kevin and I exchanged vows. Even if we are childless, I think we may still be happy together. When we first got married, we used to talk about our future goals till the wee hours of the morning. We were both cautious at first, inexperienced in love, but I felt that we genuinely enjoyed one another's presence. One night I said to myself, let's be that couple that grows old together. Yes, that's a good concept. A boy and a girl, maybe 3 children. He concurred, saying, that's exactly what I was thinking. Even for someone who wasn't very interested in dating or marriage, these light-hearted conversations were enjoyable. It was a surprise to meet Kevin. We first spoke at a gathering that I went to out of duty rather than excitement. We grew closer as a result of our mutual indifference and the fact that he appeared to be there on similar pretenses. I considered him extremely charming at the time since he was serious, a little reserved, and always kind to me. Then he made an unexpected proposal. Will you marry me, Carol? My goal is to see you smile. How come? We're not even dating yet. Is that correct? He firmly accepted his suggestion. His surprise inquiry didn't make me turn away. Rather, it got me thinking about the prospect of spending a lifetime with him. Yes, I accept if that's okay with you. His happiness was contagious, and I suddenly saw why life occasionally deals us these unanticipated, unfortunate turns. I really thought that marrying Kevin would result in a happy future when he proposed. We married within 2 months of our initial meeting, indicating that we jumped right into marriage. Our trip was a little awkward at times due to our lack of romantic experience, but that just made it more exciting. But after moving in together, approximately a month in, I started to see a clear disconnect between my expectations and our marriage's reality. Kevin once came up to me with a more serious than normal expression. He continued earnestly, "Carol, there's something I need to discuss." When he suggested that I think about giving up my work to become a stay-at-home mom, I was shocked. He had never before voiced any displeasure with my work, so this request came as a surprise and signaled the start of an odd change in his conduct. "Why would you ask that?" I questioned, puzzled by his sudden change. "When you work, it makes me feel unneeded," he confessed. "Did someone suggest that to you?" I asked, trying to understand his sudden insecurity. "No, but at my company, all the other men's wives stay at home. It's just how things are there," he explained. I had been clear from the start of our marriage that I intended to keep working, especially since saving money was crucial for our plans. Kevin's new insistence baffled me. But we agreed I would continue working after we got married, didn't we? I reminded him. "I know, but as my wife, I hoped you'd consider my feelings." He responded, his concern more about fitting social norms than our mutual happiness. "Why not just pretend I've quit? There's no need for me actually to leave my job," I suggested, expressing my reluctance to give up my career. However, Kevin seemed increasingly worried about how others perceived him. "If things don't change, I'll be ridiculed by my colleagues and bosses. I'm supposed to be the head of this household, aren't I? Please just do as I ask," he pressed, unwilling to listen to my reasoning. "I can't make such a decision immediately." "Let me think about it," I said, needing time to weigh my options. "All right, but please decide soon," he urged, his tone urgent. I knew I couldn't let this issue drag on, fearing what might follow if I didn't act decisively. Seeking advice, I turned to my boss, Madison. She had worked as an administrative assistant since high school and had faced a similar situation with a controlling ex-husband, eventually leading to her divorce. Now she was a dedicated single mother and someone I greatly admired. That must have been tough, I mused, considering divorce as I reflected on her strength and resilience. Navigating the early days of our marriage, Kevin and I found ourselves at a complex juncture. "It's tricky since we're newlyweds," I pondered, contemplating the implications of quitting my job. "I haven't fully thought this through, but leaving my position will make it difficult to find a replacement." I shared my concerns with Madison, my boss, who had become a mentor to me. "I don't plan to quit immediately," I explained. "I'm looking for a way to keep working if possible. Perhaps we could maintain my current part-time schedule for the time being. Switching to full-time might draw too much attention." "That's a wise approach," Madison agreed, supportive of my decision to negotiate with Kevin. "If he still objects, we could propose reducing my hours officially to part-time." "That sounds like a sensible plan. Remember, you can always count on me for advice. I'm here to support you," Madison reassured me, offering a lifeline in the turbulent sea of my marital issues. "Thank you, I appreciate your support," I replied, grateful for her guidance. Our conversation deepened, and I discovered that Madison's ex-husband had also changed drastically after their marriage, a situation eerily similar to mine. This revelation was eye-opening. I hadn't considered that some men might transform so completely after marriage, becoming almost unrecognizable from the person they once were. Viewing my circumstances through this lens, I wondered if I had been misled. Despite numerous discussions, Kevin and I were at an impasse. Isn't it a woman's role after marriage to support her husband and manage the household? He argued, clinging to outdated norms. What era are you living in? Nowadays, it's common for both spouses to work, I countered, shocked by his archaic views. Maybe for other couples, but we're different. You see that, don't you? He tried to persuade me. I understand where you're coming from, but I can't agree with it. I stood my ground, asking him to consider my perspective. Kevin persisted daily, pressuring me to quit my job. Despite his efforts, they fell short. I consulted with Madison and decided to resign officially. However, in reality, I continued working part-time 4 days a week. Thankfully, Madison was sympathetic to my situation and agreed to reduce my hours. I've resigned from my job at the company, just as you wanted, I told Kevin. Really? Thank you. Now I can feel more secure about my position at work, he responded, relieved yet oblivious to the truth. By then, it was clear Kevin was primarily concerned with how others perceived him. His abrupt transformation left me bewildered. I chose to deceive him, continuing to work secretly in hopes of preserving our relationship and my independence. But I soon realized that my hopes for a fresh start were misplaced. Despite our new beginning, Kevin continued to exert his dominance and vent his frustrations on me. One day, he sprung a sudden request on me. "A junior colleague is coming over today. I need you to host," he said abruptly. I had no idea. I responded, caught off guard. "Sorry, it was a last-minute decision. Just keep it simple, please," he instructed. Determined to fulfill the request, I prepared drinks and snacks for the guests. However, when Kevin arrived, he was displeased. "Didn't I ask you to prepare for today?" he chided. "You mentioned just keeping it basic, and you took that literally. This reflects poorly on me. I need you to fulfill your role as a wife properly." "What exactly does that mean?" I did my best. "Is there an issue with what I prepared?" I asked, genuinely confused by his dissatisfaction. "No, not really," he muttered, his expression unreadable, a stark contrast to the person I once knew. From then on, Kevin began inviting guests over almost every week. While he reveled in the social gatherings, he expected me to be on standby, prepared for anything. It seemed he was trying to impress everyone with his capabilities as a husband. "Kevin, having guests over every week seems excessive," I ventured one day. "No, it's fine. Everyone enjoys it, and you should support my decisions. It's your duty as my wife." But maintaining such a lifestyle was also expensive. "How exactly am I supposed to manage it?" I asked. "Oh, stop complaining." He would dismiss any question I had as nagging and avoided giving a direct answer. Every morning, I woke up early to prepare meals, make lunch sandwiches, and see Kevin off, all while keeping his suit ready for the day. On days I worked part-time, from 9:00 a.m. to 2:00 p.m., there was barely any time to rest. Despite the business, I cherished my job. Working often felt like a welcome respite. "Carol, you seem tired lately. Are you okay?" My coworker Deborah asked one day, noticing my fatigue. "Yeah, a bit actually," I admitted. "Let me know if there's anything I can do. I'm here to help in any way I can." "Thank you, Deborah. You've been such a reliable support, unlike Kevin." Deborah understood the deterioration in how I was being treated. She was aware of my secret part-time job and had kept it hidden from Kevin. "I appreciate everything, Deborah," I expressed my gratitude. "Bill mentioned it, but I never imagined Kevin would behave like this," she confessed. "Neither did I. I've tried talking to him, but he won't listen, and we hardly have a meaningful conversation anymore." "I'm sorry. If only I were stronger." I sighed, feeling overwhelmed. "Don't be too hard on yourself. You're managing work and household tasks admirably. I appreciate all your help." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied, grateful for her kindness. Living with Deborah's support had been nothing but a positive experience for me, a stark contrast to the strain at home. However, Kevin seemed uncomfortable with how close Deborah and I had become. This discomfort led him to make a shocking and sudden decision. "Where's Deborah?" "Mom's gone," I questioned, puzzled by her absence. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, my confusion growing. "Mom's getting older, and I thought it would be best for her to be in a facility," he replied nonchalantly. "You actually placed her in a home?" My voice cracked, barely hiding my disbelief. "Yeah, just finished settling her into the new place. Now I have the house to myself," he stated as if he had just completed a routine chore. I was at my parents' home when this happened, and the fact that he unilaterally decided to place his mother in a facility shocked me. She was older, yes, but not to the extent that she required full-time care. It became clear to me that he had sent Deborah away to have the house to himself. When I visited Deborah at the facility, she looked surprised yet resigned. "I'm sorry it had to come to this," I apologized. "No, it's not your fault," Deborah reassured me. I never expected him to go to such lengths. "I'm afraid of what he might do if I resist." "I'll miss you, but I'll manage." "If you need anything, you're always welcome here," she added, trying to offer some comfort. "Thank you," I replied, feeling the weight of the situation. Afterward, we moved from our previous home into my in-laws' house. Despite managing the household diligently, Kevin never acknowledged my efforts or showed any gratitude. The idea of having children, once a topic of eager discussion, now seemed completely out of reach. Kevin often disregarded me, preferring to spend his time away from home. Additionally, he began imposing arbitrary rules. No matter how late he returned, I was required to stay awake until his arrival. If I happened to wake up later than him in the morning, he would become upset. "What time will you be home today?" I asked one evening. "I'm not sure. Just stay up until I get back, okay?" he instructed. One day, after a similar exchange, when Kevin returned home, I noticed something unusual. As I took his suit to hang it up, the air was fragrant, a sweet feminine scent that was unfamiliar to me, as I didn't wear perfume. It was unmistakable evidence of an affair. Whenever he came home late, I would catch whiffs of the same perfume. That day, he unusually suggested I go to bed before him, raising my suspicions even further. Quietly, I went to the living room and overheard their conversation. "Oh, she's clueless." "When are you going to leave her?" a woman's voice asked. "I'll kick her out soon enough," Kevin's voice responded. Clearly, their voices carried easily, especially the woman's, which was quite loud. From their discussion, it was evident that their relationship had been ongoing for some time. While the incident with the perfume didn't shock me, it left me feeling utterly disgusted. Kevin was still technically my husband, and despite my hopes for a turnaround, his treatment of me remained harsh and unchanging. As we approached the 3-year mark of our marriage, he sprung another surprise. "I have a business trip the day after tomorrow. I need you to get everything ready," he announced abruptly. "That's very short notice," I replied, the timing and suddenness raising my suspicions. "I'll be away for about 4 days. Please make sure my clothes are prepared." I couldn't help but suspect his claim of a business trip was a cover for time spent with his mistress. I remembered a conversation with a colleague's wife at a company gathering who had warned me, "Be cautious if he suddenly mentions a business trip. Our company doesn't even have those." Her words echoed in my mind as I pieced things together. My suspicions had been confirmed earlier when I found a chat on his mobile phone, accidentally left in the living room, detailing how he had taken paid leave for this so-called trip. This discovery marked a turning point for me and signaled the beginning of the end of our marriage. Armed with proof of his affair, I prepared to confront him with divorce papers upon his return. However, it was Kevin who made the first move. "Are you ready to leave? The movers will be here soon," he said coldly as soon as he returned home. "I need you to be gone before I get back," he demanded. "Why are you saying this all of a sudden?" I countered, shocked by his blunt directive. "You can't spring this on me and expect me to leave immediately." "Then I'll wait a bit, but start preparing to leave," he replied, dismissing my objections. "Goodbye." I never imagined that my once timid, overly concerned husband would transform into such a domineering partner, but this was the final straw. The future I once envisioned with him now felt like a distant memory. Living with such a man, I couldn't envision a bright future ahead. What comes next? I wondered aloud. This could get interesting. Has the mover arrived yet? "No need to rush. They should be here soon," came the reply. "Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, I'm changing the locks on the house," he added almost casually. "All right, got it," I responded, my heart sinking. "The thought of not having to see your face again is a relief," were his parting words. After nearly 3 years of marriage, convinced our relationship was irreversibly over, I swiftly left the premises. Soon after, I instructed my lawyer to file for divorce. Despite our circumstances, my husband boldly posted pictures with his mistress on social media, an act of brazen audacity. How could he be so reckless, not realizing he was providing even more evidence of his affair? Even our mutual friends noticed his strange behavior, marking the public unraveling of what we once shared. After leaving my in-laws' home, I transitioned back to full-time work and moved into a high-rise apartment in the suburbs, a place I had long dreamed of living. The apartment was spacious, ideal for one, and felt wonderfully liberating without Kevin's presence. About a month after settling in, I was jolted one morning by the doorbell. Peering through the monitor, I was stunned to see Kevin standing outside. "Hey, it's me, Kevin." "Open up, Carol," he called out, his voice presumptuous and demanding. His sudden appearance and the entitlement in his tone were beyond my comprehension. Deciding to feign ignorance, I thought it might be more amusing than outright rejecting him. Who are you?" "I'm sorry, but I don't know you," I responded through the intercom. "Don't tell me you've forgotten your husband's face." "I'm not married. I think you've mistaken me for someone else." I continued watching as desperation seemed to wash over him, his face a shadow of the timid man I once knew. "Please just listen. I've been deceived and I need Carol's help," he pleaded. "I'm sorry, but I'm not obligated to assist you. If you persist, I'll have to call the police." "Seriously, after all, I don't know you," I retorted, steadfast in my resolve to treat him as a stranger. Kevin must have thought I would always be there to solve his problems, but I was no longer the person who tolerated such dependency. Yet he remained stubborn, unwilling to relent. "That's it. You made this mess, so it's up to you to fix it." "You don't have to be so tough on me," he whimpered. "Oh, and by the way, you can't stay at your parents' place anymore," he added abruptly. "What do you mean? Do you know whose name the house is under?" I questioned, surprised by his statement. "No, but it used to belong to Deborah." "Now it's in my name," I explained, revealing a significant change he was unaware of. Kevin had insisted I leave when I confided in Deborah, which visibly upset and disappointed her. "I can't believe my son has turned out like this. I'm truly sorry, especially after all the help you've given us," Deborah had said during one of our conversations. "Deborah, you're divorcing Kevin, aren't you?" she had asked. "Yes, it's for the best," I confirmed. "In that case, I'll transfer the house to you," she offered, making a decision that took both me and presumably Kevin by surprise.
The envelope felt heavier than it should have. No return address, just my name and the salon's address printed in clean, precise letters. I probably wouldn't have opened it right away if I hadn't noticed the slight bulge in the middle, like something more than just paper was inside. My name is Evie, and that manila envelope changed everything. I was alone in my salon after hours, doing the books like I always did on Tuesday nights. The steady hum of the air conditioning and the lingering scent of hair products had always been oddly comforting. But something about that envelope made the familiar space feel different. Wrong. Inside were photos. High-quality ones, taken with a good camera by someone who knew what they were doing. The first showed my husband Jack sitting at a cafe I didn't recognize, his hand resting on top of someone else's. The second made my stomach lurch. It was Sadie, my daughter-in-law, her fingers intertwined with his, both of them leaning in close like they were sharing secrets. The timestamp showed last Thursday. The day Jack said he was meeting clients in Phoenix. The day Sadie told Ethan she had an art gallery meeting. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Ethan. "Mom, you coming to dinner Sunday?" Sadie's making her famous lasagna. I stared at my son's message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you respond normally when your world is cracking apart? When you're looking at proof that your husband of 28 years is having an affair with your son's wife? Wouldn't miss it. I typed back, then set my phone face down on the counter. More photos spilled out. Jack and Sadie walking together in what looked like a park. Entering a hotel. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. The salon phone rang, startling me again. I checked the caller ID. Emily, my best friend and voice of reason for the past 2 decades. "Hey, you still doing the books?" she asked. "Want to grab a late dinner?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out except a strange, choked sound. "Evie, what's wrong?" I looked down at the photos scattered across my desk. "Can you come to the salon? I just need you to see something." "Give me 15 minutes, she said, no questions asked. That's why I loved Emily. While I waited, I tried to make sense of it all. Jack had been distant lately, sure, but I'd chalked it up to work stress. And Sadie, sweet, artistic Sadie who'd made Ethan happier than I'd ever seen him. She'd been calling me more often, asking for advice about marriage and family. Was she trying to ease her guilt? Or playing some deeper game? The bell above the door chimed as Emily walked in. One look at my face and she locked the door behind her, flipping the sign to closed. "Show me," she said. I handed her the envelope. Watched her face as she went through the photos, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. "Both of them. How long have you known?" "About 20 minutes. I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "The worst part? Sunday dinner. I'm supposed to go watch my son kiss the woman who's sleeping with his father. Watch him tell her he loves her while she pretends to be the perfect wife." Emily set the photos down carefully like they might bite. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the last photo in the stack. Jack and Sadie leaving the hotel, his hand on the small of her back. So casual, so comfortable. Like they'd done it 100 times before. "I don't know," I said. "But I can't let Ethan walk into Sunday dinner blind. I can't watch them destroy my son." "We'll figure it out," Emily said, pulling up a chair beside me. "But first you need a drink. A strong one." As she reached for her purse, another envelope slipped from between the photos, smaller than the first. Inside was a single note. "This is just the beginning. More proof to come." I had no idea who sent these photos or why, but one thing was certain. My quiet life running a salon and playing happy families was over. And maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Emily stayed with me until midnight, plotting and planning over a bottle of wine. By the time I got home, Jack was already in bed, his soft snores echoing down the hallway. I stood in the doorway, watching him sleep, wondering how many nights I'd done this same thing, completely blind to who he really was. The next morning brought a new kind of hell, pretending everything was normal. Jack kissed me goodbye like always, his cologne lingering in the air after he left. The same cologne I'd smelled on Sadie last week, when she stopped by the salon for a trim. The memory made me gag. "You're distracted today," Maria, one of my stylists, said as I nearly poured color developer into the wrong bowl. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Had a late night doing the books." My phone buzzed. A text from Sadie. "Hey Mom, can we grab coffee? Need your advice on something." The casual mom hit me like a slap. I'd loved hearing her call me that, had been so grateful that Ethan found someone who wanted to be part of our family. Now each letter felt like poison. "Sure, sweetie. Lunch break at 1. We met at the little cafe across from my salon. Sadie was already there, fidgeting with her wedding ring. Ethan's grandmother's ring. My mother-in-law's ring. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I've been wanting to talk to you about Ethan." I took a slow sip of water, studying her face. She looked tired, nervous. "Good. Is everything okay?" I asked, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "He's been working so much lately. The startup's taking all his time, and She paused, twisting the ring again. "I feel like we're drifting apart." The irony almost made me laugh. "Almost. Marriage takes work," I said carefully. "Communication is key. No secrets." Sadie's hand jerked, knocking over her water glass. Ice cubes scattered across the table as she scrambled for napkins. "I'm so clumsy lately," she muttered, her cheeks flushing. I don't know who to talk to about this stuff. You and Jack have such a strong marriage. How do you do it?" I helped her mop up the water, buying time to control my expression. "Trust," I said finally. "Without trust, you have nothing." Her phone chimed. She glanced at it, and for a split second, I saw panic flash across her face before she quickly turned it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Oh, just work stuff." She grabbed her purse. "I should actually get going. Gallery meeting. Thanks for listening, Mom." I watched her hurry away, nearly colliding with a waiter in her haste. Emily's words from last night echoed in my head. "We need proof. Real proof, not just photos from some anonymous source." Back at the salon, I called the number Emily had given me. A private investigator named Marcus answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Harper? Emily told me you might call. Let's talk about what you need." As I explained the situation, Jack texted. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. One more thing," I told Marcus. "I need you to track my husband's movements tonight. He says he's working late." "We'll start immediately," Marcus said. "And Mrs. Harper? Based on what you've told me, I suggest we also look into your husband's financial records. These situations often have a money trail." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the salon mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow. Harder, more determined. My phone buzzed again with another text from Jack. "Love you." 3 weeks ago, that message would have made me smile. Now it just made me wonder how many other women he'd sent those same words to. How many times he'd said them to Sadie while Ethan was working late, building their future, trusting them both. The bell above the door chimed and Ethan walked in. My heart stopped. "Hey, Mom," he said, grinning. "Got time for a quick trim? And maybe some advice? I'm thinking about surprising Sadie with something big." Marcus's report arrived in my email at 3 a.m., jolting me awake with its quiet ping. I'd been sleeping on the couch lately, claiming back pain. Really, I just couldn't stand lying next to Jack, pretending I didn't know. The PDF opened to reveal page after page of financial records, photos, and text messages. My hands started shaking when I saw the numbers. Jack had been moving money around, draining accounts I didn't even know existed. Our retirement fund was almost empty. "You need to see this," I texted Emily. "Now." She called immediately. "I'm coming over. Make coffee." While I waited, I scrolled through the surveillance photos. Jack hadn't been working late. He'd been meeting with someone named Lucas Reed at various hotels and restaurants. But here's where it got interesting. In half the photos, he was with Sadie. In the other half, Sadie was with Lucas alone. The doorbell rang just as I reached the section about Lucas. Emily didn't even take off her coat before grabbing my laptop. "Holy shit," she whispered, scanning the report. "Sadie's not just sleeping with Jack. She's sleeping with this Lucas guy too. And Jack knows about it." "It gets better," I said, pointing to a bank statement. "Look where the money's going." Emily's eyes widened. "Annat skafferi. In Lucas name." Sadie's big break into the art world. I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. They're using my retirement money to fund her career and her lover's business. Does Ethan know anything about this gallery? He thinks it's just where Sadie works. He's so proud of her for making connections in the art world. I grabbed my coffee cup too hard, nearly cracking it. He's planning to surprise her with a trip to Paris. For their anniversary. Emily was still scrolling. "Wait, there's more. Look at these messages between Jack and Lucas." The texts revealed a scheme so twisted it took my breath away. Lucas was blackmailing both Jack and Sadie, threatening to expose their affair to Ethan. Jack was embezzling money from his clients to pay him off, using the gallery as a front for laundering the funds. "This isn't just an affair," Emily said quietly. "This is criminal." My phone buzzed, Ethan calling. I let it go to voicemail, unable to trust my voice. "You have to tell him," Emily said, before he invests more money in their future. Tell him what? That his father and his wife are both cheating on him? That they're involved in fraud? That everything he believes about his family is a lie? My voice cracked. It'el destroyim. Better he hears it from you than the police. A key turned in the front door. Jack. Emily and I froze as his footsteps approached the kitchen. Evie, why are you up so? He stopped short, seeing Emily and the laptop. Something in our faces must have given us away, because he went pale. What's going on? I turned the laptop toward him, showing a photo of him leaving a hotel with Sadie. You tell me. I can explain, he started, but I cut him off. Can you explain the missing retirement fund too? Or the money laundering? Or why you're letting our daughter-in-law sleep with both you and her gallery partner? He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every bit of his 50 years. It's complicated. Actually, it's very simple, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. You're going to call Sadie right now. Tell her to come over. We're going to have a family meeting. Evie, please. Or I can call Ethan first. Your choice. Jack pulled out his phone with shaking hands. As he dialed, another text came through on my phone, from an unknown number. Mrs. Harper, this is Lucas Reed. We should talk. I have a proposition that might interest you. I showed the message to Emily, who raised her eyebrows. Think he's trying to blackmail you too? No, I said, watching Jack's desperate attempt to reach Sadie. I think he's offering me a way to take them all down. For the first time since finding those photos, I felt something other than pain. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Or maybe it was revenge. At this point, I wasn't sure there was a difference. I met Lucas Reed at a coffee shop downtown, far from my usual haunts. He was younger than I expected, with the kind of smile that probably got him whatever he wanted. Today, it wasn't working. Mrs. Harper, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for meeting me. Cut the charm, I replied. What's your proposition? He placed a USB drive on the table. Everything you need to take Jack down. Bank records, client lists, proof of fraud. Enough to put him away for a long time. And what do you want in return? Immunity. He leaned forward. When this breaks, I want to be seen as the whistleblower, not the accomplice. And I want Sadie left out of it. I almost laughed. You're sleeping with her, helping steal my money, and now you want to protect her? She's not who you think she is. He glanced around before continuing. Jack approached her first, threatened to ruin Ethan's company if she didn't help him. He needed someone with art world connections to make the gallery legitimate. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. And you? I own the gallery, but Jack owns me. I'm just trying to survive this. My phone buzzed, Ethan again. Third call today. Each ignored call felt like another betrayal. Why should I believe you? Lucas pulled out his phone, played a recording. Jack's voice filled the space between us, threatening and cold in a way I'd never heard before. Either you keep Sadie in line, or I'll make sure your sister's rehab records become very public. Your choice, kid. My hands started shaking. He's blackmailing both of you? Among others. Check the drive. But Mrs. Harper. His confidence cracked slightly. Be careful. Jack's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. I left the coffee shop feeling like I was walking through fog. At the salon, Emily was waiting with Marcus, our PI. You met with Reed? Marcus asked sharply. That was risky. Look at what he gave me. I plugged in the USB drive. Files populated the screen, hundreds of them. Client records, bank statements, emails. Jack hadn't just been stealing from us. He'd been running a sophisticated fraud scheme for years. This is bigger than an affair, Emily said quietly. This could destroy everything. The salon, Ethan's company. Mom! We all froze. Ethan stood in the doorway, looking confused. What's going on? Why haven't you been answering my calls? Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a text from Jack. Where's the USB drive Lucas gave you? Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Ethan saw the message. Dad? Lucas? What USB drive? The moment stretched like glass about to break. I looked at my son, my brilliant, trusting son who still believed in happy endings, and made my decision. Sit down, honey. There's something you need to know. Actually, a new voice said, there's nothing he needs to know right now. Jack stood in the doorway, Sadie beside him. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Emily, Marcus, please give us some family time, Jack said smoothly, but I saw his hand tighten on Sadie's arm. They're staying, I said, standing. Everyone's staying. It's time for truth, Jack. Mom, what's happening? Ethan's voice cracked slightly. I reached for the USB drive, but Jack moved faster than I expected. Suddenly he had my wrist, his grip just tight enough to hurt. Think carefully, Evie, he he whispered. Some truths destroy more than just marriages. Looking into his eyes, I finally saw what Lucas meant about desperate men. This wasn't just about affairs or money anymore. This was about survival. Let go of my mom, Ethan said quietly, dangerously. The bell above the door chimed. We all turned to see Lucas walking in, holding another USB drive. Sorry I'm late, he said. But I thought you might want the backup copy, Mrs. Harper. The one I already sent to the FBI. Jack's grip loosened. In that moment, I saw our whole life together crumble, and felt nothing but relief. The FBI arrived within hours. I watched from behind my salon window as they led Jack away in handcuffs, his perfectly pressed suit wrinkled from the struggle. He'd tried to run. Of course he had. Ethan hadn't said a word since Lucas revealed everything. He just sat in my office chair, staring at the USB drive like it might explode. Sadie stood in the corner, tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another performance. I can explain, she whispered. Ethan, please. Don't. His voice was ice. Just don't. Emily brought coffee nobody would drink. Marcus talked with the FBI agents, explaining his investigation. And I waited, feeling strangely hollow, like everything inside me had been scooped out and replaced with static. Mrs. Harper? An agent approached. We need to discuss your salon's finances. It appears your husband used the business to. I know what he used it for. I cut in. Will I lose it? That depends on how much you can prove you didn't know. Sadie made a small, choked sound. I can help with that. I have records, dates when Jack first approached me. When he threatened Ethan's company if I didn't. Threatened. Ethan stood so quickly his chair crashed backward. What exactly did my father threaten? He said he'd destroy your startup. That he had evidence of financial irregularities he'd planted. I thought I was protecting you. Lucas stepped forward. She's telling the truth about that part. Jack was blackmailing half the art community. But Sadie, he hesitated. You didn't have to sleep with him. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan walked out without looking back. Sadie crumpled to the floor, her carefully constructed world finally shattering. I need everyone out, I said quietly. Now. Emily tried to protest, but I shook my head. Please. Just. Give me a minute. Once alone, I walked through my salon. 23 years of work. Every mirror, every chair, every bottle of product, I'd chosen them all. Built this place from nothing. And Jack had used it like his personal piggy bank, laundering money through fake appointments and non-existent services. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the safe in Jack's office. Code is your anniversary. I almost ignored it, but something made me drive to Jack's office building. His secretary let me in without question. News hadn't spread yet. The safe was behind a terrible painting of a golf course. Inside was a single envelope. Divorce papers already filled out. Dated 3 months ago. And a letter. Evie, when you find this, everything will have fallen apart. I'm sorry for what I've done to our family, but not sorry enough to stop. The money's gone. All of it. But I've left you something better, freedom. Sign the papers. Save yourself. Jack. My laugh sounded hysterical even to my own ears. He'd planned his own escape, right down to divorcing me before everything exploded. Protecting himself until the end. The secretary appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Harper? Your son is here. Ethan looked destroyed, older somehow. Mom. Sadie's gone. Left a note saying she's staying with Lucas until I decide what I want. What do you want? I want. He picked up the divorce papers, scanned them. I want to go back to last week when my biggest problem was choosing between investors. When my family wasn't a lie. I touched his cheek, this man who'd once been my tiny boy. Not everything was a lie. Tell me what to do, Mom. Please. But I couldn't. Because in that moment, looking at Jack's perfectly prepared escape plan, I realized something. Revenge wasn't what I needed. Neither was justice, really. What I needed was to rebuild. Myself, my business, my relationship with my son. We start over, I said finally. Together. And we do it right this time. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lucas. There's more you need to know. Meet tonight? I deleted it without responding. Whatever game he was playing, whatever secrets were still hidden, they could wait. Right now, my son needed me. And for the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what to do. I visited Jack in jail a week after his arrest. The orange jumpsuit made him look smaller, older. Gone was the confident financial advisor who'd charmed clients with his easy smile. In his place sat a stranger with hollow eyes. Why did you want to see me? He asked through the glass. The FBI found more accounts, I said. Hidden ones. In the Caymans. He didn't react. Just studied my face like he was trying to memorize it. You look tired, Evie. The salon's being audited. They're questioning every transaction for the past 5 years. I might lose everything. You won't. He leaned forward. Check the storage unit on 5th. Box 247. The keys in my golf bag inside the 9-iron grip. I almost got up and left. More secrets, more breadcrumbs leading to God knows what. But I stayed, watching my husband of 28 years fidget with his handcuffs. Sadie's pregnant, I said. His face went white. Is it? She doesn't know. Could be yours, could be Lucas's. Could even be Ethan's. I pressed my hand against the glass. Our grandchild might never know which man is their grandfather. Jack's composure cracked. He started to cry, ugly, racking sobs that drew stares from the guards. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt empty. Later, at the storage facility, I found the box. Inside was a laptop and a letter from Lucas to Sadie, dated months ago. My darling, Jack's getting suspicious. He knows about us, about the real reason for the gallery. We need to move faster. Once the money's transferred, we'll have enough to disappear. Just keep playing your part a little longer. All my love. Elle. My phone rang. Emily. Turn on the news. Now. I rushed to my car, flipped on the radio. Lucas Reed had been found dead in his gallery. Apparent suicide. Note confessing to everything, absolving Jack of all wrongdoing. My hands shook as I called Ethan. Voicemail. I tried Sadie next. Nothing. At home, I found Ethan sitting in the dark kitchen. She's gone, he said. Took everything. Even Mom's jewelry you were saving for my wife. Ethan. Lucas didn't kill himself, did he? His voice was eerily calm. Dad arranged it. And Sadie knew it was coming. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Storage unit was a trap. Laptops tracked. FBI en route. Hope you didn't touch it. S. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. They're coming for you now, Ethan said, still unnaturally calm. Dad's last move. Set you up to take the fall. The faithful wife who knew everything, helped launder the money through her salon. How do you know all this? He pulled out his phone, showed me texts between him and Sadie. It's done. Your mom found the laptop. By tomorrow, she'll be in custody and you'll be free. I'm sorry, baby. Your dad said it was the only way. My own son, my baby boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, had helped them destroy me. Why? I whispered. Because Dad promised to fix everything. My company, Sadie's Gallery, all of it. Said you were the only one who could take the fall without serving serious time. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. The sirens were right outside now. Red and blue lights painted my kitchen in alternating waves of color. Like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Mrs. Harper? A voice called through the door. FBI. We have a warrant. Ethan stood, finally looking at me. I'll tell them everything. Make it right. No, I said, surprising myself. You won't. Because in that moment, watching my son wrestle with his betrayal, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about protection. And sometimes, protecting the ones you love means letting them live with their choices. I opened the door to face the FBI, my head held high. Behind me, I heard Ethan start to cry, just like his father had in jail. Like father, like son. Some things, it seems, run in the family. 3 months into my house arrest, Sadie showed up on my doorstep. The ankle monitor felt heavier as I watched her stand there, one hand protectively over her growing belly. Emily said you might shoot me if I came, she said quietly. Emily exaggerates. I stepped aside, but I did consider it. She looked different, haunted maybe. The confident artist was gone, replaced by someone who jumped at the sound of my kettle whistling. Lucas didn't kill himself, she said, sitting at my kitchen table. The same table where Ethan had betrayed me. Jack had him killed. I have proof. I set 2 mugs down harder than necessary. Why now? Because I'm tired of running. Because this baby deserves better than a life built on lies. She pulled out her phone, played a video. Lucas, alive, speaking directly to the camera. If you're watching this, I'm dead. Jack Harper arranged it through his contacts. The suicide note's a fake. The real money's not in the Caymans. It's in Switzerland, under his wife's maiden name. He's been planning this for years. Sadie, I'm sorry. I really did love you. My hands shook as I processed what this meant. The FBI already cleared Jack. He's being released next week. I know. He's already contacted Ethan, promising to restore everything once he's out. She looked up, tears streaming. But Ethan doesn't know what his father really is. What he made me do. A key turned in the front door. Ethan walked in, freezing when he saw us. "Mom, what's she doing here?" "Showing me the truth," I said. "Finally." His face hardened. "You can't trust her. She's trying to manipulate you like always." "Like you did." I stood, anger rising. "Setting me up with that laptop? Letting your father destroy my life to save your company. There's always a choice," Sadie whispered. She played the video again. Ethan's face went from anger to confusion to horror. "No, Dad wouldn't. He couldn't." "He did," I said. "And now he's coming home, expecting everything to go back to normal. Planning to use my identity to access millions I didn't even know existed." My phone buzzed. Jack's lawyer. "Release scheduled for tomorrow morning. Client requests family presence." Ethan sank into a chair. "What do we do?" "We." I laughed bitterly. "There is no we. You chose your side. Mom, please. I can fix this." "Actually," Sadie said, "we all can." She pulled out another phone, Lucas's. "Everything's here. Every transaction, every threat, every murder Jack arranged. Lucas kept records of everything. Why didn't you turn this in before?" "Because Jack said he'd kill the baby if I did. But now," she touched her stomach, "now I realize this child deserves to know at least one of their possible fathers was brave enough to stand up to him." My ankle monitor beeped, a warning that I was getting too close to the door. Such a simple sound, representing everything Jack had taken from me. "If we do this," I said slowly, "we do it my way. No more secrets, no more schemes. And you both have to live with the consequences." They nodded, looking young and scared and finally honest. My phone buzzed again. "Emily." Jack's lawyer filed early release papers. "He'll be out in 3 hours." I looked at my son, at the woman carrying my grandchild, at the evidence that could destroy the man who'd tried to destroy me. 28 years of marriage, of trust and love and lies, all coming down to this moment. "Call Marcus," I told Ethan. "Tell him to meet us at the FBI office. Sadie, forward everything to Emily. She'll know what to do if anything happens to us." "What are you going to do?" Ethan asked. I touched my ankle monitor, thinking of Jack in his prison jumpsuit, looking small and old. "I'm going to show your father what real revenge looks like. And then I'm going to make sure he never hurts our family again. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about protecting what's left of the people you love, even if they've broken your heart." 1 year later, I stood in my newly renovated salon, watching Emily arrange flowers for the grand reopening. The ankle monitor was long gone, replaced by a quiet confidence I'd never known I had. Jack got 20 years. The evidence on Lucas's phone had been irrefutable. Money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud. His lawyer tried claiming diminished capacity, but the jury hadn't bought it. I sat through every day of the trial, watching the man I'd loved for nearly 3 decades transform into a stranger in an orange jumpsuit. "The first customers arrive in an hour," Emily said, adjusting a lily. "You ready?" Before I could answer, the bell chimed. Sadie walked in, pushing a stroller. My granddaughter, Grace, slept peacefully inside, her tiny fist clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Sorry we're early," Sadie said. "Ethan's parking the car." I bent down to kiss Grace's forehead, breathing in that perfect baby smell. DNA tests had confirmed what we'd all suspected. She was Ethan's. Some might call it a miracle, but I just called it justice. "The new sign looks amazing," Ethan said, walking in. He'd lost the startup CEO polish, looked more like himself now. "Harper & Son Beauty Company has a nice ring to it." It did. Using the recovered money from Jack's Swiss accounts, we'd rebuilt the salon together. Ethan handled the business side while I focused on what I did best, making people feel beautiful, inside and out. "Mrs. Harper?" Maria, my longest-serving stylist, called from the back. "There's a letter for you." The envelope was cream-colored, expensive. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Jack's precise handwriting unchanged by prison. "Evie, I heard about Grace. About the salon. About everything. You won fair and square. I just wanted you to know. I really did love you. Still do. Some lies are built on truth. G." I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my appointment book without responding. Some truths don't need acknowledgement. "Mom." Ethan touched my shoulder. "You okay?" "Better than okay," I said and meant it. "Where's that champagne Emily's been hiding?" We gathered around the front desk, Emily, Ethan, Sadie, the entire salon staff. Grace woke up just in time, her eyes so much like her father's it made my heart ache. To new beginnings, Emily toasted. And old wisdom. I added, thinking of that first envelope of photos, the anonymous tip that had started it all. Later, after the successful reopening, I found another envelope in my office. Inside was a familiar-looking photo of Jack and Sadie at that cafe, but this time I noticed something in the background, a reflection in the window. Lucas taking the picture, playing all sides until the very end. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thought you should have the whole set. Sorry it took so long to make things right. Elle's sister. I smiled, remembering Lucas's final gift. The evidence that had saved my family, delivered through the one person he'd truly wanted to protect. His sister, the real owner of the gallery, who'd been quietly documenting everything. Ready to go? Ethan called. Grace wants her bedtime story from Grandma. I locked the photo away with Jack's letter. Some stories don't need to be told, at least not yet. Maybe someday, when Grace is older, she'll ask about the grandfather she never met, about the woman her mother used to be, about the way families can break and heal and transform. But for now, I just wanted to hold my granddaughter, to watch my son and his wife rebuild their marriage one day at a time, to run my fingers through fresh-cut hair and listen to the gentle hum of blow dryers and conversation. Because revenge isn't always about destroying what hurt you. Sometimes it's about building something better from the ruins. Sometimes it's about choosing love over anger, forgiveness over punishment. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to truly move forward. I turned off the salon lights, watching the new sign glow in the darkness. Harper & Son Beauty Company, a testament to what we'd lost, what we'd found, and what we'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Some beautiful things, it turns out, can only be created after everything falls apart.
Sandra is my name. I'm simply an ordinary girl who loves to keep things simple. I work as an editor at one of the major publishing houses downtown. It's always been a juggling act to meet deadlines and find time for yourself. I never really got into the dating scene much, and that's probably why. I like spending time alone by myself, generally with a nice book or a leisurely stroll in the park close to my flat. However, everything changed on a bright Saturday that appeared normal enough. I was walking along carefree, lost in the world of a podcast. The park was bustling with people, their dogs and children playing. It was a lively place. I think I forgot where I was walking because I almost ran into a man on a bicycle the next time I looked up. He screamed, "Watch it," and abruptly veered. He spoke in a gruff tone, making it obvious that he was annoyed. "I'm so sorry." I snapped out of it and took out one earpiece. I was unaware that I had strayed into the cycling path. His expression had changed from anger to amusement as he halted his bike and looked around. "You must pay attention to your direction. Sometimes this journey is like a jungle." "Yes, I apologize. It was entirely my fault," I said, a little ashamed of myself. I smiled shyly at him, brushing a stray lock of hair out of my face. He chuckled, and the tension vanished instantly. "Hello, I'm Tom," he introduced himself. "Sandra." I shook his hand in response. His hold was confident and firm. "So, Sandra, always this distracted, or is it just my charming presence?" I laughed at this sly smile on his face. It was a demanding work week. My mind is already elsewhere, having a great weekend. Attractive enough, he gestured to a tiny cafe at the edge of the park and said, "I was just about to grab a coffee at that place over there. Would you like to come along, as an act of reconciliation for nearly taking me to the stars?" I gave it some thinking. I could really use a coffee, and he seemed like a lovely guy. Yes, of course. I could give you a good story about coffee. Tom was a pleasure to talk to as we strolled to the cafe. He informed me about his weekend activities, which included riding and hanging out with pals, and his work at an automobile sales company. He relocated here since he believed it offered better prospects. He wasn't from the city. Big city dreams and all that. He smirked and replied. I also talked a little bit about my work, how I developed a career out of my love of reading. "Beats being stuck in a cubicle doing something you hate," I continued. When we got to the cafe, we placed our coffee orders. I couldn't help but notice how at ease I felt with him while we waited. It was odd since, generally speaking, I'm a little reticent around strangers, but with Tom, the talk flowed naturally. We began spending more time together after I met Tom. He seemed laid back and amusing, but I soon began to notice small things about him that bothered me. At first, nothing significant, just occasional little remarks that caused me to pause and think. We were going to go out to dinner one Saturday when the subject of careers and family somehow came up. I assumed we were just talking about work and life, nothing serious. "So how's the book world treating you?" Taking a sip of his beer, Tom questioned. "As usual, quite busy. Nobody's deadlines stop for them," I shot back, prodding at my salad. "Yes, I get that, but wouldn't you want to be trapped in that situation forever? You would want to settle down eventually, perhaps reduce the number of hours worked," he remarked breezily. I stopped, froking in place. "Tom, not really. I'm passionate about what I do. I don't think I'll be giving it up very soon, or truly at all." Tom gave a shrug. "Yes, but what about when we become parents? Don't you wish to be in more places?" It surprised me that someone asked. "We?" I laughed apprehensively. "That's jumping way ahead, don't you think?" He dismissed it with a laugh. "Yeah, you're right, just thinking out loud." I made an effort to get rid of the pain, but it persisted. Tom invited me to supper with his folks a few weeks later. I took it as a positive indication that things were becoming more serious. Though anxious, I had hope. However, that evening further broadened my perspective. His parents owned a small, immaculate suburban home. Mrs. Reed, his mother, was beaming when we got there. "Sandra, it's very nice to meet you at last." She pulled me into an embrace and exclaimed, "Tom has told us so much about you." "Mrs. Reed, thank you for having me. It's nice to meet you as well," I managed to reply, grinning back at her. After dinner was served, everything was going according to plan until Mrs. Reed began discussing marriage and family. "You know, Tom was always the one in charge," she said as she started to eat more potatoes. "We've always told him the importance of finding a good girl who knows her way around the house." Tom's father gave a nod. "Yes, without a doubt. It all comes down to laying a solid foundation. A woman takes care of the home, while a man is required to provide for it." I looked over at Tom, expecting him to comment, but he was too preoccupied with his meal. Mrs. Reed went on, "That's how we brought up our boys. Family comes first. Yes, Tom." Tom responded, "Right, Mom," finally raising his head. His agreement felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to keep my cool. "It's interesting because I've always been pretty career-oriented. I love my job, and I believe in contributing equally," I said. Mrs. Reed smiled, a bit too sweetly. "Of course, dear, but you'll see. Priorities change when you start having children. It's only natural for a woman to want to stay at home with her babies." The rest of the evening, I felt like I was in a fog. We left shortly after dinner, and on the drive back, the air between us was tense. "Your mom has some strong opinions about family roles," I said, breaking the silence. "Do you see things that way too?" He hesitated, then said, "I think there's some truth to it. I mean, it worked for my parents." Despite the uneasy dinner with Tom's parents, our relationship marched forward. Somehow the good times seemed to outweigh the bad, and I found myself agreeing to marry him. Looking back, love must have blinded me because those warning bells were still ringing in the back of my mind. The wedding planning started, and it was all a whirlwind. Tom wanted something simple, and so did I. We decided on a modest ceremony with just close family and friends. As the day approached, the real pressure began to mount, not about the event, but about what our lives would become afterward. After the ceremony at the reception, Tom's mom pulled me aside. Her smile was wide, but her eyes were serious. "Sandra, dear, I'm so happy for you both. Remember, a good wife supports her husband no matter what." "Thank you, Mrs. Reed. I intend to be a supportive partner," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And remember, dear, when the babies start coming, it's best if you're at home. You can't trust strangers to raise your children." Her words felt like a warning, and the finality in her tone made my stomach turn. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Later, Tom and I had a moment alone. "Your mom talked to me about kids and me not working." I started, watching his reaction closely. "Yeah, she's just looking out for the future. She means well, Sandra. You know how moms are." Tom brushed it off, taking a sip of his champagne. "But you know I'm not planning to quit my job, right? Even when we have kids," I pressed, needing him to understand. Tom paused, his face serious. "We'll see, Sandra. Things change. We'll do what's best for our family." After our wedding, Tom suggested we move to a larger apartment closer to his work at the car sales company. The place was nice, bigger than our old one, but it was right next door to his parents' house. I had my suspicions about why he chose this particular spot, but I agreed, hoping for the best. Once settled, the reality of our new life together began to surface. Tom started bringing up his idea of a traditional family more often, where he would be the breadwinner and I would handle the household, and eventually the kids. One evening we sat down with our finances spread across the dining table, a mess of bills and budgets under the dim light. I tried to show him how keeping both our jobs was more beneficial, especially with the economy being unstable. "Look at these numbers, Tom. With both incomes, we're not just getting by, we're actually saving. It makes no sense for me to quit my job," I said, pointing at the spreadsheet. Tom shook his head, pushing the papers away slightly. "It's not just about the money, Sandra. It's about having a real family life, like my parents had." I sighed, my frustration growing. "But it's not the past, Tom. Things are different now. We both need to contribute." He didn't seem convinced, and the discussion ended with a heavy silence. The situation got more complicated with his mother, Mrs. Reed, living so close. She dropped by often, unannounced, each visit with a new critique about how I was managing our home. One afternoon, I was sorting through some work emails when she came in without a greeting. She started inspecting the house, wiping her finger along the bookshelf, looking for dust. "Sandra, you really should focus more on keeping a cleaner house. A dusty home is not a healthy home," she said, her tone sharp. I clenched my teeth, trying to keep my cool. "I cleaned yesterday, Mrs. Reed, and I work full-time. It's just a little dust." "That's just it. You work too much. If you were home more, maybe things wouldn't slip through," she countered, walking over to the linen closet next. She pulled out a sheet, checking for any signs of improper laundering. I followed her, my hands balled into fists at my sides. "I manage my time just fine, Mrs. Reed. Tom and I are both happy with how things are." She tutted, shaking her head as she moved to the kitchen to scrutinize the contents of our fridge. "A woman's place is taking care of her home and her husband. These modern ideas about women needing careers are nonsense." Every comment stung, and I felt my defenses rise. "Maybe that worked for you, but I'm not you. I won't just quit my job to become someone I'm not." When Tom came home that evening, I tried to explain how suffocating his mother's visits were becoming. He listened, but his response chilled me. "Mom's just trying to help, Sandra. She has a lot of experience running a home." "But it's our home, not hers. I need you to stand up for me, for us," I pleaded. Tom looked torn, but he finally said, "She's my mom, Sandra. She means well. We should at least consider her advice." The argument that night was long and painful. We went to bed angry, the first of many silent nights. As the days turned into weeks, I felt more like an intruder in my own home, constantly judged and found wanting. The pressure to conform to an outdated idea of a wife was relentless, and my resolve to maintain my independence was tested every day. As the months rolled by, Tom's nagging about me not pulling my weight at home started to increase. He'd come home from work, look around with a scowl, and comment on the dusty shelves or the dinner that was either too bland or overcooked, because I'd rushed it after a long day at the publishing house. His favorite refrain became, "If you can't manage both, maybe you shouldn't be working." One evening, after a particularly harsh critique of some slightly undercooked pasta, Tom let it drop. "Sandra, I'm serious. If you can't meet me halfway and take care of the house properly, maybe we should rethink this whole arrangement," he said, implying that a divorce was on the table. I loved Tom despite everything. I didn't want our marriage to fail over something like this, so I made a decision that pained me deeply. The next day, I talked to my boss, Ellen, about quitting my job to become a full-time housewife. Ellen was shocked and tried to persuade me otherwise. "Sandra, you're one of our best. Are you sure about this?" she asked, concern etching her features. "I don't see any other way, Ellen. I have to try to make things work at home," I admitted, feeling defeated. Ellen, ever the problem solver, proposed a compromise. "What if you could work from home, manage your projects remotely? It's becoming more common now. You wouldn't have to quit." The idea seemed like a lifeline. I agreed to the arrangement, but decided not to tell Tom. Instead, I told him I had resigned. He was overjoyed, thinking I had chosen our home life over my career. So I started my new job as a housewife, seeing Tom off to work each morning and greeting him when he came home. But as soon as he left, I'd power up my laptop and dive into my editing work. It was a strange double life, but it worked. The money I earned from my remote job I secretly saved in a separate bank account, just in case. However, living on just Tom's salary was tougher than we thought. Despite my best efforts to economize, 3 months later, we were scraping the bottom of the barrel. I tried to bring up the topic gently. "Tom, I think it might be necessary for me to go back to work. We're running through our savings too fast." Tom's reaction was swift and angry. "That's because you're spending too much. You need to learn how to save properly," he snapped. I was stunned. I hadn't bought anything for myself in months, and always hunted for the cheapest deals at the supermarket. His words hurt deeply, and I felt a mix of anger and humiliation. The next day, his mother came over with a mission to teach me proper budgeting. She dragged me to the store and pointed out the cheapest, often poorest quality products. "Buy these, Sandra. Stop wasting money on expensive stuff," she lectured as we walked down the aisles. Back home, she showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer. "You use too much. You need to make do with less," she instructed, her tone patronizing. She even started checking my receipts, scolding me for any purchase she deemed unnecessary. "Why are you buying this? Just stick to basics," she would say, shaking her head in disapproval. Living like this was unbearable. Every day felt more suffocating than the last. I was losing my sense of self to their imposed austerity, living under constant surveillance. The situation was becoming untenable. I was trapped in a life of pretended submission, and every part of me screamed for escape. But for now I held on, biding my time and planning my next steps carefully. It all reached a boiling point one drizzly Tuesday evening. I was on the phone in the living room, pouring my heart out to my mom. "I just don't know how much more I can take, Mom. His mother is constantly over here teaching me how to stretch $1 until it screams. I get it, we need to save, but this is too much." Mom's voice was a mix of concern and anger. "Sandra, that's not normal. You need to have a conversation with Tom about boundaries. It's your home too, not just his or his mother's playground." Just as I was nodding, feeling a bit strengthened by my mom's support, Tom stormed in from the other room, his face red with anger. He must have heard me complaining. He snatched the phone right out of my hand. A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some street gossip. He snapped into the phone before hanging up. I was shocked, my hand shaking a bit. "Tom, you can't just grab my phone and talk to my mom that way." "Oh, I can't. Maybe if you had some respect for us, I wouldn't have to." His voice was rising, and I could see the veins in his neck bulging. "Tom, listen to yourself. Can't you see this isn't healthy? I pleaded, hoping to reach some part of him that remembered what love felt like, but he was beyond reason. Healthy? My mom was right. I should never have married you. His words cut deeper than I would have expected. That's enough, Tom. I'm your wife, not some puppet you and your mom can control. I shot back, my own anger flaring up now. Then act like it or leave, he shouted, his face just inches from mine. I stared at him, disbelief and sadness warring inside me. You want me to leave at 4:00 a.m.? It's dark and pouring rain outside. If you don't like how things are, then yes, get out. His eyes were cold, unyielding. I knew then that nothing I could say would change his mind or the situation. Shaking, I grabbed a few essentials, my laptop, some clothes, and my phone. I went for my purse next, but Tom was quicker. He grabbed it first, holding it out of my reach. You think you're leaving with this? I earned this money, not you. Fine, keep it, I said, my voice hollow. I couldn't believe this was happening. I called a taxi and waited by the door, my heart pounding. The taxi pulled up, and I stepped out into the cold night air, the rain drenching me immediately. As I climbed into the car, a sense of surreal calm settled over me. I was doing this. I was leaving. At the hotel, as I lay in the unfamiliar bed, I couldn't help but feel a surge of relief amidst the turmoil. Despite everything, I hadn't quit my job. My secret savings account, unknown to Tom, was now my lifeline. The first light of dawn was barely peeking through the curtains when I got up. I hadn't slept much, the weight of my decision pressing down on me through the night. Today was the day I would take control back. I had an appointment with a lawyer to talk about filing for divorce. It felt surreal, like a scene from someone else's life, not mine. The lawyer's office was a stark, unassuming place tucked between a row of old brick buildings. Inside, Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, was a straight-talking man who wasted no time. Let's get down to business, he said as soon as I sat down. You're here to file for divorce, correct? Yes, I confirmed, my voice steadier than I expected. I can't go back to the way things were. Mr. Henderson nodded, his face serious. All right, I'll need all the details. Any joint accounts, property, anything that needs untangling. We spent the next hour going over everything. He explained the legal process, what I could expect, and what my rights were. He was thorough, ensuring I understood every step before drawing up the necessary documents. You'll need to serve these to your husband, he instructed as he handed me the envelope, sealed with a stamp that felt like the seal on my old life. Armed with the divorce papers, I went back to the apartment I had shared with Tom. He was still asleep, probably exhausted from last night's fallout. The apartment felt different as I packed my things. Every item I tucked away marked the end of another shared chapter. By the time I finished packing, Tom was stirring. He wandered into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and clearly confused to see my bags piled by the door. "What's going on?" he mumbled, scratching his head. I didn't have much to say, just actions to take. Instead of answering, I handed him the envelope. "These are for you," I said, my voice void of the emotion I felt turning inside. Tom tore open the envelope, a frown forming as he scanned the contents. "Divorce." He laughed, disbelief lacing his tone. "You think you can just walk out and everything will be all right." He looked up from the papers, his eyes cold. "Come back when you're ready to apologize, and maybe I'll consider taking you back. But remember, you'll have to listen to my mother from now on." The absurdity of his words almost made me laugh, but I held it back. "I'm not coming back, Tom. I'm done. We're done." Walking out of that apartment, the air felt different, crisper, almost hopeful. I went straight to a new place I had rented days before, small but mine alone, a place where I could start rebuilding. Each step felt heavy but right. I returned to the office a few weeks after moving in and immediately became engrossed in the hectic schedule of author meetings and publishing deadlines. I had feared I had lost my spark, but being among my coworkers once more and experiencing the usual rush of a deadline drawing near rekindled it. Weeks at work slipped into days, and before long, I was back to my usual schedule, using my recent personal upheavals as fuel to juggle projects and deadlines with renewed efficiency. Coming back felt incredibly fantastic. Surprisingly, the familiar terrain of errors and texts felt even more comfy. I made new acquaintances during this period, folks I had known long before Tom. We got together for meals on the weekends and after work, and I gradually began to feel more like myself than I had in a long time. I felt grounded by their jokes and laughing, and I rediscovering aspects of myself that I had forgotten in their presence. After a few months of this new chapter in my life, I received an unexpected call. It was Tom, his voice unnatural, full of a desperation I was not ready for. "Hey, I guess I got fired. Things are quite difficult," he began, fumbling over his words. "I was thinking maybe you could help me out financially." The request seemed outlandish and, considering our past, a little offensive. "And perhaps we should start afresh. Reassemble. Please be more serious if you're going to apologize to my mother and me." His tone waned, hesitant but optimistic. It was unavoidable for me. I dissolved into giggles. After all, the proposal's sheer ridiculousness was too much. "After you kicked me out, Tom, do you really believe I would return back to help you and your parents? All of your lofty ideals seem to have vanished out of thin air when you lost your job." The phone rang for a moment. "So that's a no," he said, sounding diminished in some way. "I'm doing pretty well, Tom. To be honest, I'm too happy with my independence to give it up any time soon. I wish you well, but it's not going to happen with me." My harsh remarks were the last straw that would break our relationship. I had a wave of empowerment after hanging up. Even though Tom's call seemed absurd, it confirmed for me something very important. No amount of money or persuasion could ever take away my true freedom.